أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. Today I am going to trace the history of the Haroof Muaqtaat and my research. I am going to share my research and the history of these letters which are known as secret of the Quran, and they are known as the secret between Allah and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Basically, it's a conference presentation, and this presentation was made at Etna conference in Athens, Greece, May 2018. But before we move on, please subscribe to and share my channel for relevant and useful academic videos on these topics of importance. Leave your comments for feedback in the comment box. First of all, briefly, I introduce the Haroof Muaqtaat. There are 14 Arabic alphabet letters repeatedly used in the beginning of 29 chapters out of 114 of the Quran. They are used in 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s and 5 in number. They have engaged scholars' attention from east and west, from the Muslim world and from the non-Muslim world, from old age till modern age. So I am going to present the background to the study. The study will be important because it's going to tell what other scholars from the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have said and what the modern scholarship is saying about it. So let's begin. The approach of scholars from the times of the Prophet till date towards these letters has not been a single meaning approach. Different scholars give different views. First of all, we talk about these letters as the secret of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Qurtubi says, Qurtubi, who was a Spanish scholar, he quotes from Amir Ash-Shabi, Sufyan al-Thawri and a group of hadith scholars to say that this is a secret which Allah wants to maintain and nobody dare meddle with this affair. I'm not going to comment on that, just to quote Qurtubi as he has quoted the scholars. Then there are other scholars who say that actually these letters stand for numbers. So Alif stands for 1, Lam stands for 30, Mim stands for 40 and Saad stands for 90. That means Alif, Lam, Mim will make 161 number altogether. Ibn Jubair, quoted by Hafs, interprets them as names of Allah in broken form. So Alif, Lam, Ra, Ha, Mim and Noon make Ar-Rahman. See, Alif, Lam, Ra, Ha, Mim and Noon. Ar-Rahman. Mujahid, he says these are the names of the Quran, and Al-Balkhi hold that these are the names of the Quran. Qurtubi quotes them in his book published 2003, page 133. Then there is another scholar, Tusi, also quoted by Ibn Hafs 1998, page 256, that these are the names of 6 days during which Allah created this world. Interesting, isn't it? Then, great scholar Zamakhshari, he calls them the names of Quranic chapters. These are names. This is in his tafsir, page 966 and page 140. Scholars have different opinion and they have disagreement on the same. Scholars such as Ibn Ashur and Shaltut disagree with this stance on the ground that the aim to name is to remove doubts. With this approach does not serve, because if these are the names, then Alif Lam Mim are the names of 6 chapters, and 6 chapters will not be distinctively known by one name. So this is an interesting comment. Then other scholar like Muhyiddin Sheikh Zada, quoting Ibn Abbas, says these are phrases. So Alif Lam Mim is a phrase and it means Anallahu A'lam. I am God, I know. These are non-textual and philosophical interpretation provided by Ibn Arabi, who was a great Arab scholar. Some scholars call them speciality of the Quran. Allama Tabatabai in his tafsir Al-Mizan claims that these are the specialties of the Quran and no other divine book has them. According to him, if you ponder a little over the chapters that share these letters such as Mim, Ra, Tawasin, that is plural of Tasin, and Hawamim, that is the plural of Hamim, you find in the related subject certain commonality in these chapters and certain context which is common and which you cannot find in other chapters. This is in his tafsir published in 1973, page 111. Allama Suyuti, the great scholar, the great Muslim scholar who is unitedly accepted by all scholars, he says that these chapters which have prefix letters contain words. So he goes into the text and he says that these chapters contain words that begin with or contain these letters. So much so that if we replace Qaf with Noon, it looks very unsuitable. The chapter Qaf, for example, has words such as Quran, Khalq, Qawl, Qurb, and Qawlan, and Raqib. This is in his book, page 112 to 113. And such chapter like Al-Qalam has words such as Majnoon and Yasturun, Mamnoon, and Ya'lamoon. So he makes a difference from other scholars by going into the text. Then comes a German scholar, Noldeki, a great German scholar of the Quran. He calls them the names of the writers who wrote the Quran for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But later on he changed his views. Guzens, an Orientalist scholar, notes about Hamim that they remark on the dreadful Hamim, the boiling water. So he reads Hamim from that as perhaps a typical word for future punishment. And this is in his book published 1924, page 259. Guzen as cited by Jeffrey, 1924, page 259. So there is another scholar, Bellamy. He says that these are the abbreviations of Basmala, that is Bismillah. But he does not and he cannot provide evidence for what he says. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now I am going to talk about my research. After letting you know about the background of the Haroof Muaqtaat, I shall explain my research and tell what is the basic difference between my research and the research carried on by early scholars. In the background of these studies, I made a linguistic study of the Haroof Muaqtaat. Linguistic study would mean that I have studied it from a language point of view, that I have studied the chapters or the surahs word by word, line by line, sound by sound, meaning by meaning, theme, style, everything in relationship to these letters. And this is for the first time that such a study has been carried out, not to mention that a doctoral research was conducted on this topic at the International University, Islamabad and University of London, where the pilot project of this study was conducted at the MA level. So, the linguistic text study, the hypothesis was there is something linguistic in it. That means that there is some relationship between these letters and the language of the chapters. This was a unique hypothesis to begin with, that these letters relate to language and therefore their solution must be linguistic. The consideration led to the close study of the text. Now, our first task was to devise a formula which could be applied to all the chapters. It's very interesting because we needed a uniform approach which could explain from Alif Lam Mim to Alif Lam Ra to Ha Mim to Kaf Ha Ya Ain Sad to Sad to Noon to Qaf, all. So we needed one formula. So we are not initially explaining letter, we are first of all explaining the formula, and this is very important and very interesting. So at the end of this lecture, you would know the basic formula that is working in all the chapters, and we will apply the formula without any exception. So this is for the first time that instead of guessing about a letter here and a letter there, we are giving a formula. So the first thing that we made was that we needed a procedure to explain how we were going about it. So as a teacher of linguistics and as a student of Quran, first thing was that we make a linguistic study of the whole text of a certain chapter. So first of all, we made the study of sounds. For example, if we are studying Qaf, then we will be studying Qa sound. If we are studying Alif Lam Mim, then we will be studying A, La, Ma sound. If we are studying Sad, then we will be studying the Sa sound. If we are studying Alif Lam Ra, then we will be studying Al-A, La, Ra sound. This was the first aspect. Then we went to the next step and was that we studied the words made by these letters. For example, if we are talking of Alif Lam Mim, then we will study all those words which have Alif Lam Mim in them. They may be combined with other words or with other letters, and they may not be combined with other letters, as I will give you the examples later. So these were called morphemes. Then we looked at templates. Templates of these sounds, for example, alam, alim, almal, alam, all such words. So and the next stage was to go for cohesion, how the words are related by sound, by sense, and if they are related by sense, then we were studying the coherence. If we are studying the sounds or any other reference, the cohesion. So ultimately we went to the theme and style of the whole chapter. So we went by a certain procedure, and that procedure was to collect data. To collect data, to analyze data, to study it further, to come to some conclusions and to present the results. So it was a very scientific approach and it was a serious study. Then we tested the data. We tested the data by comparing and contrasting. There are certain results. If we get those results for Alif Lam Mim, so same results should not be there for Alif Lam Ra. The formula is the same, but for something which is followed by Alif Lam Mim should not be followed by Alif Lam Ra. That was the main difference. Another was that if we are studying the patterns in Alif Lam Mim, then they should not be found in Qaf. And if it is found in Qaf, those should not be found in Noon. That was something very interesting to test. So we did the testing also. Then we compared the results of different graphs and different tables and came out with our conclusions. Those conclusions can be studied in the research papers, but what I mean to say or what I mean to tell here is that there is a proper basis for our work. It is not just guess. It is not just a whimsical study or not just a thought presented here, but based on a research work that can be studied in the library, and the book is also available. Here, that point which I am going to make is that when we made a survey and when we compared the Alif Lam Mim and Alif Lam Ra, we came to know that the Alif Lam Ra chapters, they contain the Rabbul Alameen. The Rabbul Alameen and the Rusul more than other chapters. So there was the indication that the Ra actually stands for Rusul and Rabb. And this was the first that we could find from these two chapters. So the point was that we made the basic distinction between Alif Lam Mim and Alif Lam Ra, and such a distinction had never been made before. So we will present the more details in another video. So far I am going to make this point that we were the first to make a clear distinction between Alif Lam Mim chapters and Alif Lam Ra chapters. Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We in our last video talked about the Ra factor in Alif Lam Ra, and we mentioned that Ra stands for Rusul and Ra stands for Rabb. And when we compared the data and when we checked it against others, we found that our initial finding was supported by statistical data. That was very interesting. So when we carefully noted, we found that Alif Lam Ra chapters, we noted there were Yunus, Hud, Yusuf, Ibrahim and Hijr. All these refer to prophets. Every chapter significantly deals with a different theme, and every chapter does so with raw specification. So, another scholar, he called them that these are the Amba ar-Rusul. Amba ar-Rusul, that means the news of the prophets. That means our study tallied with the early findings as well. And that means that our finding was supported by the early studies. And thus, we found that our study was going in the right direction. Then we surveyed all chapters and we found that similar patterns were found in all. And when we contrasted this with Alif Lam Mim, we found that the Alif Lam Mim chapters, they were talking about the Almighty Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. And in this way, the power of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala was more emphasized in Alif Lam Mim chapters. For example, Allahu la ilaha illahu al-hayyul qayyum, the Ayatul Kursi, or Allahumma malikul mulk, tu'til mulka man tasha, wa tanzi'ul mulka mimman tasha, wa tu'izzu man tasha, wa tuzillu man tasha. So you find that these chapters have patterns, specially related to Alif Lam Mim. So we can see that if we look at Baqarah, we find Alam in that, Lam in that, Al-Mal, Alim, Mala, and many other patterns made of Alif Lam Mim letters. Very interestingly, when we look further, we see that these chapters, the Baqarah chapters, they contain Alam, Azlam. So they combine other letters, but the common letters is Alif, Lam, Mim. Then when we referred to the attributes of Allah, we found very interesting finding that these letters directly relate to the attributes of Allah. So we mentioned before that scholars were saying Alif Lam Mim, Anallahu A'lam. Now there is support that Alif Lam directly relates to Allah, and to all the 13 chapters discuss Allah's role in the universe. All the Alif Lam chapters, there are 13 in numbers. So there is absolute control and authority over the universe and his role in sending, guarding and training of the prophets and in the destruction of the disobedient nations and individuals. There is complete control. Then when we look to Mim and the attributes of Allah, we find Al-Malik, Al-Mulk, Al-Mu'min, Al-Muhaymin, Al-Mutakabbir, Al-Qayyum, Al-Muhyi, Al-Mumit, Al-Mawla, Al-Muhit in Alif Lam Mim chapters. These attributes are explained in the set chapters. So look at the crown verse and the Ayatul Kursi and you will find very good examples. Then when we come to Hamim chapters, we note the same formula and we apply the same formula. So the great beauty of our research is that we devised one formula, as I said, that Hamim also have the special tributes toward Allah. So Hamim refers to Rahman, Rahim, Hakim, Hakam, Hakim, Halim, Hamid. So we can translate them. Rahman and Rahim, merciful. Hakim is the ruler. Hakam is the decider. Hakim is wise. Halim is the tolerant. Hamid is the praised one. So these are the very dominant attributes of Allah in the Hamim chapters. And the theme of the chapters as the binding force of the universe explained with reference to past and present events. So if we look at the typical verse, we can see that the Hamim surah The first Hamim surah, that is Al-Mu'min, that says, الَّذِينَ يَحْمِلُونَ الْعَرْشَ وَمَنْ حَوْلَهُ يُسَبِّحُونَ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّهِمْ وَيُؤْمِنُونَ بِهِ وَيَسْتَغْفِرُونَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا رَبَّنَا وَسِعْتَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ رَحْمَةً وَعِلْمًا فَاغْفِرْ لِلَّذِينَ تَابُوا وَاتَّبَعُوا سَبِيلَكَ وَقِهِمْ عَذَابَ الْجَحِيمِ. So if you look at this one verse, we can see the Hamim in almost every word here. So you see, Allazina yahmiluna al-arsh. Very interesting. Angels are not called angels here. They are called the upholder of the arsh of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And hamilin al-arsh. Hamim. Waman hawlahu. And all that surrounds. And yusabbihuna bihamdi rabbihim. Again Hamim. And then it says, Rabbana wasata kulla shay'in rahma. Rahma, again Hamim. And it says, Faghfir and Waqihim Azab al-Jahim. So Jahim also contains Hamim. So we can see that there are Yahmilun, Man Hawlahu, Bihamdi Rabbihim, and Rahma and Jahim. 5 words in one single verse that contain Hamim. Very interesting. Very interesting finding. So we note that these letters, they have a special role in the text. They have a special role in the theme. Now if you look at the themes of Hamim chapters, we find Ha for Hayat and Mim for Maut. And we note that these chapters actually deal with the theme of death and life in detail. Detail. And that means that, first of all, they talk about the life and death plan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They talk about the objections made by disbelievers. They talk about the life and death of the land, which dies but comes to life back. And therefore we see that the theme of life and death is covered very beautifully. And this was supported by Professor Ahmad Rafiq Akhtar when he said that Ha stands for Hayat and Mim stands for Maut. But what we have done is that we have given the formula in which the whole fits, and we are providing evidence from the text. So we see that these chapters contain Hamd of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His hukum, and as He is a creator of life and death, and He is the controller of life and death. That means these chapters are not only decorated with these themes, but they carry on the philosophy of life and death, and they explain them in more detail. In a later video, I am going to specially talk on these Hamim. Presently, I am just covering the main general theme of the Haroof Muaqtaat. So I hope you have enjoyed, and I hope you shall be with us in the future videos. Thank you very much.